If you think you've seen darkness before, you haven't seen London in 1888. Before we dive into this nightmare, remember, subscribe, leave a comment, and stay with us until the end, because this is one story the world still hasn't escaped from. The fog rolled in thick that night, a wet, suffocating blanket that swallowed the cobblestone streets of Whitechapel. The gas lamps flickered, their yellow light bending and trembling against the mist. It was past midnight when Constable John Neal turned into Bucks Row, a narrow alley that smelled of coal rain and something else, something foul. He'd walked that beat for years, but tonight felt different. The silence was too deep, the shadows too long. Then he saw her. A woman's body, lying against the cold stones, her eyes staring into nothing. Her throat, slashed so clean it almost looked surgical. The blood was dark, almost black under the lamplight, running in small rivers toward the gutter. "Dear God," Neal whispered, stepping back as his whistle cut through the night. Within minutes, other officers arrived, their boots splashing through the puddles. Dr. Rhys Llewellyn, the local surgeon, examined her under a flickering lantern. "Name's Mary Ann Nichols," he murmured, voice low. "But everyone calls her Polly." He looked around, eyes narrowing. Whoever did this knew exactly what he was doing. Word spread fast through Whitechapel. By morning, the narrow streets were packed, market women whispering, men muttering under their breath. Someone said it was a lunatic. Others swore it was a butcher gone mad. But the fear was the same. Detective Inspector Frederick Aberline of Scotland Yard arrived 2 days later. He'd seen crime before. He'd dealt with the underworld, opium dens, and gang wars, but nothing like this. He stood by the crime scene, scanning the alley. No footprints. No weapon. No witnesses. Just fog and whispers. "Start with the locals," he ordered. Someone must have seen something. But no one had. Or at least, no one would say. A week later, the second body appeared. Annie Chapman, found in Hanbury Street, behind a row of lodgings. Her body had been mutilated worse than the first. Whoever the killer was, he was escalating. Aberline clenched his fists as he looked at the scene. "He's mocking us," he said to his assistant, Sergeant Chandler. "He wants to be found." But there was something else that haunted him, something in the precision of the cuts. It wasn't rage. It wasn't chaos. It was method. The newspapers were quick to seize it. The Whitechapel horror. Another woman slain by a monster in the night. Each headline spread panic like wildfire. Londoners stopped walking alone. The pubs stayed open later, but no one drank in peace. And through it all, the fog never lifted. Aberline gathered his team in the yard's briefing room, the air thick with pipe smoke. "He strikes late," he said, pointing at the map marked with red pins. "Always near the slums. Always women, alone, desperate." He paused, glancing at the files on the table. "There's a pattern. But it's not random." A young constable handed him a letter. It was smeared with red ink. "Found at the Central News Agency this morning, sir." Aberline read it aloud. "Dear boss. I keep on hearing the police have caught me, but they won't fix me just yet. I am down on whores, and I shan't quit ripping them till I do get buckled. Yours truly, Jack the Ripper." The room went silent. That was the moment the name was born, a name that would haunt history. Within days, London was obsessed. Every shadow looked like a killer. Every man with a knife became a suspect. The city had never been more alive, or more terrified. Aberline questioned dozens: doctors, barbers, slaughterhouse workers. He even followed rumors of an American sailor who'd vanished the same week. Nothing. Then, a witness came forward, a woman named Elizabeth Long. She claimed she'd seen Annie Chapman hours before her death, talking to a man in a dark overcoat and deerstalker hat. He had a soft voice, she said, almost polite. "Could you recognize him again?" Aberline asked. She hesitated. I think I could, but it was so dark. That night, Aberline barely slept. He replayed the description again and again. A polite voice. Surgical cuts. Precision. Intelligence. Was this a man of science? A doctor? Someone who knew anatomy, maybe even enjoyed it? Then came the third killing. The morning of September 30th, a carriage driver named Louis Deemschutz turned into Berner Street and saw what he thought was a pile of rags blocking the entrance to Dutfield's yard. He jumped down, lifted his lantern, and froze. It wasn't rags. It was a woman. Her name was Elizabeth Stride. Her throat was slit, but unlike the others, she hadn't been mutilated. Someone had interrupted him. Aberline arrived within the hour. "He's getting bolder," he muttered. "And angrier." Before the body could even be taken away, a second murder was reported less than an hour later, this time in Mitre Square. Catherine Eddowes. Same signature. Same precision. 2 murders in one night. By dawn, the newspapers screamed in horror. Double murder in Whitechapel. The Ripper strikes again. Aberline stood over the map again, tracing the killer's route with trembling fingers. "He's hunting," he whispered. "He knows these streets better than we do." His eyes fell on a small scrap of paper taken from the Mitre Square scene, part of a woman's apron, found near a wall with chalk writing that read, "The Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing." The writing was wiped away before dawn, but the words burned in his mind. Was it a clue? A message? Or something far more sinister? He stared out the window of his office as the fog rolled over the Thames, heavy and silent. Somewhere out there, in the maze of alleys and gaslight, Jack the Ripper was watching, blending into the city like smoke. Aberline knew this wasn't over. The killer was changing the rules. And when the next body appeared, it would be worse than anything they'd seen before. The days following the first 2 murders bled together in a haze of fear and confusion. Whitechapel wasn't just a district anymore. It was a wound on London's map, raw and unhealing. The narrow cobblestone alleys that once echoed with laughter and chatter now fell silent after sunset. Even the fog seemed thicker, as if the city itself wanted to hide from what walked among its people. Detective Inspector Frederick Aberline stood at the edge of Hanbury Street one grim morning in September 1888. Another woman had been found, Annie Chapman, her lifeless form discovered in a dimly lit yard. The scene, though sanitized for the public, shook even the most hardened officers. Every mark, every motionless detail whispered one thing: this was no ordinary murder. Whoever did this was methodical, patient, and monstrously precise. Aberline removed his hat, staring at the blood-stained cobblestones as the morning fog rolled in like a shroud. "He's learning," he muttered. "He's getting faster." Within hours, London's press had already splashed the story across their front pages. "Horror in Whitechapel," screamed the headlines. Reporters swarmed the district like vultures, sketching every alley, interviewing anyone who claimed to have seen a shadow or heard a scream. The people wanted a name, a face, a monster they could point at. But the police had nothing, no witnesses, no solid leads, and no clear motive. Then came the letters. The first arrived at the Central News Agency on September 27, 1888. Its red ink scrawled in jagged handwriting that seemed to laugh off the page. It began casually, almost tauntingly, "Dear Boss." The writer claimed responsibility for the murders and promised there would be more. The tone was cocky, theatrical, someone who enjoyed the spotlight. At the bottom, a chilling signature, "Yours truly, Jack the Ripper." The name stuck. It burned across newspaper columns and into public consciousness overnight. Within days, Londoners whispered Jack as though he were a ghost haunting their streets. Mothers warned their daughters not to walk alone. Every stranger became suspect. Aberline and his team treated the letter as both a lead and a trap. Was it a hoax, a journalist seeking fame? Or was it truly from the man they hunted? The words carried an arrogance that felt real, a personality that danced between intellect and insanity. But then, another letter arrived, this one even darker. It began with a mocking tone, "From hell." Inside the small brown package, along with a note, was something so grotesque the police refused to release the full details. Aberline's hand trembled as he read it. Whoever wrote this wasn't just playing a game. He wanted to be feared. The city's paranoia reached its breaking point. Vigilante groups began patrolling Whitechapel at night. Innocent men were chased, beaten, and accused. Police stations were flooded with supposed confessions, false tips, and desperate letters from citizens claiming to have seen the Ripper's face in every shadow. Aberline, exhausted and sleepless, sat in his dim office one evening surrounded by piles of reports. A single oil lamp flickered beside him, casting long, anxious shadows across the wall. He ran his fingers over the letter again and again, studying the loops of each word. It wasn't just handwriting, it was personality. Arrogant, confident, almost gleeful. "He's proud of it," Aberline whispered. "He wants us to admire his work." Meanwhile, behind the fog-choked windows of London's pubs, theories swirled like smoke. Some believed the killer was a butcher, given the precision of the wounds. Others whispered it was a doctor, someone with surgical knowledge and access to the human body. A few went further, spinning tales of royal conspiracy, secret lovers, and cover-ups that reached Buckingham Palace itself. But Aberline didn't believe in conspiracy. He believed in patterns. And one night, he found one. Pinned to his wall was a large map of Whitechapel, each murder marked by a small red pin. Alone, they were meaningless. Together they formed something, a route, a rhythm, a pulse. The killer wasn't random. He moved with intent, circling, choosing victims within a small area he knew well. Whoever Jack was, he walked these streets daily, unnoticed. The next attack came on September 30th, a night that would live in infamy. 2 women murdered within an hour of each other, just blocks apart. The newspapers called it the double event. Panic became hysteria. The Ripper had outpaced the police, mocking their every move. At one of the scenes, Aberline noticed something odd, a piece of chalk writing on a brick wall near a bloody piece of cloth. The words read, "The Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing." It was cryptic, strange, and possibly inflammatory. The police commissioner, fearing riots, ordered it wiped clean before dawn. Aberline protested, but his words were ignored. The evidence, and perhaps a vital clue, vanished into the night. Days later, a new witness came forward, a cab driver named George Hutchinson. He claimed to have seen one of the victims talking to a man near Miller's Court shortly before her death. His description was detailed, too detailed, Aberline thought. A tall man, well-dressed, with dark eyes and a foreign accent. It was as if he'd memorized a character from a stage play. Still, it was the best lead they had. Aberline ordered sketches made, patrols increased, but deep down, he knew they were chasing a ghost. The Ripper wasn't just killing women, he was dismantling the city's sense of safety. Every unsolved night made him stronger. Every dead end made him a legend. The fog outside thickened as the detective stared out his office window. The sound of distant footsteps echoed through the narrow streets, blending with the creak of carriage wheels and the faint tolling of midnight bells. He couldn't shake the feeling that the Ripper was watching, somewhere in that mist, smiling at their confusion. Then, just as the city began to breathe again, thinking perhaps it was over, another scream tore through the night. Aberline froze. His heart pounded. Somewhere in Whitechapel, the Ripper had struck again. And this time, he had left something behind. The scream echoed through the narrow streets of Whitechapel like a signal flare in the fog. By the time Detective Aberline reached the scene, dawn was breaking, a pale, sickly light crawling across the city's rooftops. In a cramped room at Miller's Court lay Mary Jane Kelly, the Ripper's final known victim. The horror that awaited inside would scar every man who stepped through that door. The police sealed the area off, But word spread faster than the fog. Crowds gathered, their whispers turning into a low collective dread. Women clutched their coats tighter. Men kept their eyes low. Whitechapel wasn't just terrified anymore, it was broken. Aberline stood in the doorway, his face pale beneath his bowler hat. "This isn't just murder," he said quietly to Sergeant Godley. "It's a message." He didn't elaborate, but his mind was racing. The precision, the escalation. This killer wanted the world to see what he could do. To carve fear into the heart of London itself. The newspapers wasted no time. By noon, the words "Jack the Ripper strikes again" blazed across every headline. Reporters swarmed the police station, sketch artists drew from second-hand accounts, and conspiracy theorists flooded taverns with wild tales. Some said the Ripper was a surgeon driven mad. Others swore it was a nobleman hiding behind wealth and title. Theories spread faster than facts. Aberline sat in his office that evening, surrounded by the debris of an impossible investigation. Maps, reports, statements, 1,000 threads that led nowhere. His lamp flickered as he reread the witness testimonies. A butcher, a foreign sailor, a doctor, a lunatic. Every name on his list had an alibi, a hole, or a convenient disappearance. Then he noticed something. Each suspect had one thing in common: proximity. Every single one lived or worked within walking distance of the murders. It wasn't someone coming from afar, it was someone inside Whitechapel, blending in, hidden in plain sight. He exhaled sharply, his breath fogging the cold window pane. "You're right here among us," he whispered. "Watching." A few nights later, Aberline walked the same streets the killer had once prowled. The gas lamps flickered weakly, their glow swallowed by the ever-present mist. In the silence, every sound, a distant laugh, a clattering horse hoof, a dropped bottle, made his hand twitch toward his coat pocket. He passed the 10 Bells pub, where many of the victims had last been seen alive. Inside, drunken chatter mixed with nervous laughter. Ordinary people, trying to pretend the world hadn't changed. But it had. Then, from the corner of his eye, Aberline caught sight of a man standing under a street lamp, tall, slender, wearing a dark overcoat and a bowler hat. The man's face was half hidden by shadow, but something about his posture, his stillness, made the detective's pulse quicken. Aberline stepped forward. "You there," he called. The man turned slightly, the faintest curve of a smile appearing beneath the brim of his hat. Then, without a word, he vanished into the fog. Aberline ran after him, boots pounding against the cobblestones. The fog thickened, swallowing the man whole. When the detective finally stopped, gasping for breath, the street was empty. Only the echo of his own heartbeat remained. Back at headquarters, frustration boiled over. The city demanded results. The press mocked the police as clueless bobbies. Politicians whispered of replacing Scotland Yard leadership. Aberline, sleepless and obsessed, pinned new notes to his wall, lines connecting names, faces, and locations. "He's clever," he muttered to himself. "He stops when we expect him to strike. He strikes when we think he's done. He's controlling the story." A young constable entered, hesitant. "Sir, another letter's arrived." Aberline looked up sharply. "From who?" The constable swallowed. "It's signed, the same way as before." Aberline unfolded the paper. The handwriting was the same mocking style, the same red ink. It was brief this time, almost casual. "I am not finished yet. You will hear from me soon. Yours truly, Jack the Ripper." The detective crushed the paper in his fist. "He's toying with us." But no more murders came. Not that month. Not the next. It was as if the Ripper had vanished into thin air. Weeks turned into months. Whitechapel began to breathe again, though fear lingered in its corners like a ghost. New crimes, new scandals filled the newspapers, pushing the Ripper from the front page. But Aberline couldn't let go. He spent his evenings revisiting the files, convinced the answer lay somewhere among them. The evidence was all there, the patterns, the letters, the psychology. But no matter how he turned it, one piece never fit. One night, as he stared at the map covered in red pins, he realized something chilling. The pattern didn't end with the last murder. It continued, a spiral, looping inward, toward one specific address. His own precinct. Aberline froze. The idea clawed at his mind. Could it be someone inside the investigation? A policeman? A coroner? Someone with access to every detail, and the perfect cover to hide in plain sight? He didn't sleep that night. Spring arrived, and with it, silence. The Ripper case was officially closed, unsolved. Aberline was transferred to another division. London moved on, at least on the surface. But beneath the gaslight glow, the legend grew. Years later, long after the case had faded from headlines, Aberline, older, slower, still haunted, was walking through Whitechapel on a cold evening when he saw it again. That same silhouette. The same tall man, standing motionless at the edge of the fog. The detective's heart skipped. No, it can't be. The man tipped his hat slightly, then stepped back into the mist. Gone, like he'd never been there. Aberline stood frozen, the sound of distant bells tolling midnight. Somewhere in the back of his mind, a voice whispered, "Some ghosts never die. Some stories never end." He turned, walking slowly into the fog, the weight of failure heavy on his shoulders. Behind him, the lamplight flickered, and for a fleeting second, a shadow moved where no one stood. More than a century later, the case of Jack the Ripper remains one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries. Hundreds of theories, dozens of suspects, yet not one confirmed name. And maybe that's exactly how he wanted it. Because legends don't get caught. They disappear into the fog. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it.